Hey everyone, What If Fan here, bringing you another exciting part of What If a Venerated Soul Reincarnated in Danmachi world. You can find the fanfic title and the original author's name on my Patreon page. Make sure to check it out and show them some love. If you enjoy the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Also check out my Patreon channel for early releases of all the series, where you can find all the series released one day ahead of YouTube. Alright, let's jump into it. Chapter 131, The Hestia Knife. Alright, Mr. Judas, we've gathered everyone who got hurt. Please, do your magic, Ina said with a small bow, her voice filled with admiration. Beside her, several guild workers slumped with relief, guiding injured citizens and adventurers into a loose formation. Judas nodded and stretched out his hand. Heal. A soft hum filled the air as a wave of green light burst outward, flowing past him like a gentle breeze. The glow washed over the injured crowd, children clutching scraped knees, adventurers bleeding from gashes, shaken civilians trembling on the ground. Gasps rippled through them. Bruises faded. Cuts sealed. Pain vanished like morning mist under sunlight. A small boy blinked down at his arm, watching the discoloration disappear before breaking into a brilliant smile. A woman who had been clutching her leg collapsed to her knees, tears streaming as strength returned to her once again. Miraculous, one guild worker whispered. It's beautiful, Nisha breathed, eyes sparkling. Ina let out the breath she'd been holding. Thank you, Judas. This will make the evacuation so much safer. But Judas didn't respond immediately. His gaze drifted past the healing crowd, toward the distant street, where smoke curled upward, where faint roars continued to echo through the city. His purple eyes narrowed. This area is safe now, he finally said. But the monsters aren't stopping. He lowered his hand, magic still faintly crackling at his fingertips. I need to head deeper into the city. Rose nodded, though worry clouded her face. Just, please be careful. Judas stepped forward, preparing to leave. The moment he turned away, another explosion shook the ground, and Judas broke into a sprint. On a random street deep within the city, another plant-like monster rampaged unchecked. Its massive body tore through stalls and stone alike, thick vines smashing into buildings and sending debris flying as panicked screams filled the air. Goddess, run! Belle's voice rang out as she grabbed Hestia's hand and pulled her along. Behind them, the monster thrashed wildly, its tendrils crushing anything in its path as it surged forward. Belle glanced around desperately, eyes darting from street to street in search of an escape. Goddess, take cover over there. She pointed ahead, toward a narrow, secluded alley barely wide enough for two people. They slipped inside just as a wooden stall was thrown where they had been standing moments before, splinters of wood exploding outward. Both Belle and Hestia crouched low, backs pressed against the cold wall, breathing hard. Thank goodness. Hestia panted, pressing a hand against her chest. That monster isn't chasing after us. Seriously, she added, forcing a weak laugh. What's wrong with Rio lately? Incidents like this just keep happening one after another. Belle didn't answer. She shifted closer to the wall, carefully peeking out from the edge of the alley. There, in the open street, the plant monster continued its rampage. Adventurers rushed in to stop it, steel flashing, magic flaring. But the difference in power was immediately clear. With a single violent swing of one of its massive tendrils, several adventurers were sent flying, bodies crashing into buildings as blood sprayed from their mouths. Belle clenched her teeth. In the wake of Judas' rematch with the Freya Familia's executives, the Freya Familia had largely secluded themselves in Folkvanger. To outsiders, it looked as though they were laying low. In truth, having witnessed Judas' overwhelming power firsthand, the executives and members alike had been driven into a frenzy of training, their competitive spirit burning hotter than ever. The Ishtar Familia, for reasons unknown, had chosen not to intervene, as if the chaos unfolding in the city had nothing to do with them. The Astria Familia was currently away on an expedition. And so, none of these factions could offer immediate assistance. The Loki Familia had already been deployed elsewhere, dealing with similar incidents across the city. Meanwhile, the Ganesha Familia was being stretched thin, splitting their forces between evacuating civilians and exterminating monsters wherever they appeared. With nearly half of Orario's strongest factions unavailable. This was one of the worst possible moments for the plant monsters to launch an attack. Belle watched as another adventurer was knocked aside, skidding across the ground and failing to get back up. She bit her lip. "Goddess," she said quietly. Hestia turned toward her just in time to see her hand drifting toward the daggers at her waist. "You stay here. I'm going out to help." "Huh?" Hestia blinked, confusion flashing across her face before realization hit her like a thunderbolt. "No, wait." She grabbed Belle's arm tightly, her fingers digging into the latter's sleeve. "What are you doing? Do you want to get yourself killed?" The goddess of the hearth snapped, her voice sharper than usual as her gaze shifted back toward the distant street where the plant monster continued its rampage, crushing stone and steel alike. "I don't know much about monsters, but even I can tell that scary, giant plant thing is far too strong for you to handle." Hestia continued, her brows knitting together. Her worry was written plainly across her face. Belle saw it. And that made her hesitate. For a brief moment, she could only offer Hestia a wry, apologetic smile. "Even so, I can't just stay here and do nothing when people are in danger," she said quietly, tightening her fists. "Please, goddess." The plea wasn't loud. But it was sincere. Hestia stared at her, searching her face, and let out a long, defeated sigh. "Damn it, Althea, if only you were here. If that woman were present, this situation would already be handled." Of course, given Althea's extreme aversion to noise, being anywhere near a festival, or chaos like this, was the last thing she would ever choose. A hero, huh? Hestia knew better than anyone how deeply her child longed to become one. It was a naive dream. Childish, even. And yet Belle pursued it with a seriousness that left no room for doubt. The hero's path. A road paved with thorns and hardship. That was exactly why. "You want to save those people, right, Belle?" She nodded without hesitation. "All right," Hestia said softly. "You can go." But before she could move, her gaze sharpened, locking onto her crimson eyes. "First, let me update your status." "That's not all," she added. Hestia reached between her breasts and pulled out a small object wrapped carefully in cloth. Somewhere far away, Loki would have been grinding her teeth hard enough to burst a blood vessel. Belle blinked, momentarily distracted by a single thought. How did that even fit in there? But her attention was immediately drawn to the item in Hestia's hands as she placed it into her palm. "I was planning to give this to you when you ranked up," Hestia said, smiling faintly. "But I think now is the right time." Belle carefully unwrapped the cloth. Inside was a dark-colored knife, its blade etched with intricate runes. The moment his fingers closed around the handle, the runes shimmered, glowing a bright, vivid blue. Before slowly dimming once more. "I call it the Hestia knife," Hestia said, her voice gentle but resolute. Chapter 132, Battle Against Violas. Using the Hestia knife, Hestia carefully cut her finger and allowed a single drop of blood to fall onto Belle's exposed back. The moment it made contact, blue light flooded the secluded alleyway. Inexplicable, holographic symbols bloomed into existence, ancient runes hovering over Belle's back as her Falna responded. The symbols shifted and rearranged themselves, reflecting the changes taking place within his body. Hestia wiped the sweat from her brow as she focused, carefully updating Belle's status. A great increase in all her ability values. Under normal circumstances, the updated status would be imprinted onto a parchment. But they didn't have one with them. Neither Belle nor Hestia particularly cared. What mattered was the result. Belle inhaled sharply, eyes widening as a rush of warmth coursed through her body. Her muscles felt lighter, her senses sharper, stronger. Hestia watched her expression change and couldn't help but smile. A small, contented smile. It was all worth it. Her thoughts drifted back to the hardship she had endured just to obtain that knife. She remembered kneeling in a perfect degiza for days on end, forehead pressed to the ground, begging Hephaestus, Aurario's most prominent blacksmith, to craft a weapon for Bel. Why are you going so far? Even as her knees ached and her forehead burned red, Hestia had answered without hesitation. I want to help Bel. There is a dream she's chasing, a path full of thorns and hardship. She had seen it the moment she witnessed firsthand how relentlessly Bel trained. Beaten. Bruised. Battered. Bones broken by her aunt's merciless training. And yet Bel never relented. At first, it had simply been a childish desire to become a hero. But now, there was more. There was a boy whose back she was chasing, a boy who, in Hestia's eyes, possessed potential she simply could not comprehend. He may be the chosen one who will come to fulfill the promised time. If that was true, then catching up to him might be even harder than becoming a hero. Hestia knew it. And somewhere deep down, she also knew that Bel would continue chasing forward even if she were fully aware of that fact. I'm a useless and poor goddess who owns nothing, Hestia had said quietly. Seeing her work so hard, knowing that the only thing I can provide is fauna. I hated that. I want to help her in any way I can. Hephaestus had gone silent. Then, slowly, she smiled. Fine. I'll make your weapon. She crossed her arms. But let's be clear, my services aren't free. You'll be paying. And thus, the Hestia knife was born. A special weapon that could only be wielded by a member of the Hestia familia. A blade that would grow alongside its user. It was also the day the Hestia familia fell 200 million Valis into debt. Thank you, Hephaestus. Hestia's gaze returned to the present, to her only child standing before her now. Good luck, Bel, she said softly. Bel nodded, gripping the Hestia knife in one hand and her nameless dagger in the other. Thank you very much, goddess. Then, without hesitation, she turned and sprinted back into action. TSK. What the hell is this thing? Oka of the Takamikazuchi familia spat the words as he tightened his grip around the handle of his massive axe. Everywhere he looked, the aftermath of the battle lay scattered across the street, injured adventurers sprawled across broken stone and overturned stalls. Some groaned weakly. Others didn't move at all. They had tried to fight back. And they had been utterly crushed. What kind of trouble did we just step into? His gaze returned to the unfamiliar monster looming at the center of the chaos. A grotesque, towering plant-like abomination, its thick vines writhed like serpents, and its massive stalk pulsed as if it were alive and breathing. Cold sweat ran down Oka's temple. This wasn't something they were prepared for. He snapped his head to the side just in time to see Chigusa draw her bow, her hands trembling as she loosed an arrow. The projectile flew true. But the monster moved. With an unnatural burst of speed, it twisted its body, the arrow slicing harmlessly through empty air. In the next instant, the ground cracked as the creature charged straight toward her. Chigusa! Chigusa! Oka roared her name as he raised his axe and lunged forward. At the same time, Makoto dropped her center of gravity and sprinted in, katana gleaming as she prepared to intercept. They were too slow. The monster suddenly accelerated, its massive head rearing back before slamming forward with brutal force. Boom! Arg! Ugh! Oka was sent flying through a stone wall, his body vanishing in a cloud of dust, while Makoto was hurled across the street, crashing through a market stall in a spray of shattered wood. Too strong. Makoto coughed, blood spilling from her lips as she struggled to lift herself up. Her vision blurred, but what she saw next made her blood run cold. Chigusa was tangled in thick, thorn-covered vines, her body lifted off the ground as they tightened around her torso. Ah! Her scream tore through the air. Chigusa! Makoto forced her arms beneath her, muscles screaming in protest as she tried to stand. Stand up! She screamed at herself, teeth grinding as her legs shook beneath her weight. But even as she struggled, she knew she wouldn't make it in time. Chigusa's body convulsed as she coughed violently, blood spilling from her mouth. A sickening crack echoed as the vines tightened further, the sound of ribs snapping under pressure. Everyone! I'm sorry. Chigusa's voice was barely more than a whisper, tears streaming down her cheeks. Uka, having dragged himself from the rubble, saw the scene and let out a broken scream as he clawed desperately at the ground. No! It seemed an adventurer would fall today. It seemed all hope was lost. Not on my watch. Shing! A white flash cut through the battlefield. In a single heartbeat, the vines binding Chigusa were severed, falling limp to the ground. Roar! The plant monster shrieked in agony, its body thrashing violently as Bel Cranel landed between it and its prey. Knees bent, stance firm, weapons drawn. The Hestia knife gleamed in one hand, a nameless dagger in the other. Chigusa, Uka, Makoto, and the remaining members of the Takamikazuchi familia rushed forward. Makoto knelt beside Chigusa, placing 2 fingers against the side of her neck. She closed her eyes, steadying her breath. Then exhaled in relief. She's alive, just unconscious. A collective sigh escaped them. Their gazes shifted back toward Bel, eyes gleaming with gratitude. There was no time for words. No time for thanks. The monster had already recovered. With an enraged roar, it charged straight at them once more. Chapter 133, Futsunamatama. Everyone! Move! Bel shouted as Uka hoisted the unconscious Chigusa onto his shoulders and the others scrambled to steer clear. The creature surged forward, its massive body crashing through the street as if it were paper, pulverizing the spot where Bel and the others had been standing only moments earlier. Bel, who was the closest to the monster, barely rolled aside, stone shards cutting into her arms as she hit the ground hard. Too fast. Her heart lurched as she scrambled to her feet. The plant monster screeched, enraged now, its vines writhing violently as several of them shot forward at once. Bel raised both of her weapons instinctively. A sharp impact rang out as the Hestia knife intercepted the attack, the sound of collision echoing through the street and clearly showcasing its durability. What an amazing knife! However, when the next strike came, Bel raised her other weapon to block. The moment it met the monster's blow, the dagger shattered instantly, bursting into fragments that flew in every direction. Metal shrapnel grazed her left cheek, drawing a thin line of blood as she staggered back. And yet, the assault didn't stop. Crack! Pain exploded through her side. Guh! One vine struck her ribs head-on, sending her skidding across the street like a ragdoll. She slammed into a shattered stall, the impact riving the air from her lungs. Bel coughed violently, vision blurring as she forced herself upright. Move! If I stop, I'm dead. The monster didn't give her time. Its shadow loomed overhead as its massive stalk came crashing down. Bel threw herself forward at the last second. The ground exploded behind her. She hit the street again, scraping her palms raw as she rolled. Her breathing came out broken and uneven. Her eyes flicked to the others. From the monster's earlier charge, the others had not come out unscathed. Uka was badly injured, one arm hanging limply as he carried Chigusa over his shoulder. Makoto was supporting another wounded familia member, her clothes soaked through with blood. The sight sent Bel's thoughts racing as she searched desperately for a way out of the situation. There were 3 options before them. We can run, defeat the monster ourselves, or stall long enough for a higher-level adventurer to arrive and slay it. The first option, running away, was discarded instantly. Retreating would only put us at a greater danger. That monster is faster than us, and trying to escape while carrying the injured is impossible. The second option, defeating the monster themselves, seemed like the most straightforward answer at first. But Bel knew better. It'll be difficult, the monster is too strong. And since it's a new species, we don't even know where its magic stone is. When facing a powerful monster, the usual strategy was to target the magic stone. Destroy it, and the body would crumble into ash. But that was easier said than done. A monster wouldn't simply stand still and allow it. Then there was the third option. Stalling for time and hoping someone stronger would arrive. Perhaps members of the Ganesha familia, if they weren't already stretched thin. It's uncertain. Whether they would fall before help arrived, or whether help would arrive at all, there were far too many unknowns. What am I thinking? Stop being so pessimistic. Belle shook her head, realizing doubt had begun to creep into her thoughts. The moment your mind falters, you've already lost. Althea's voice echoed clearly in her head. That's right, a hero can't allow their judgment to be clouded by fear or negativity. I just have to do what I can do. The time for hesitation was over. Belle steadied her breathing, tightening her grip on her blades as she focused entirely on the present. The monster roared and charged again. Belle clenched her teeth, forced herself into a stance as she grabbed an extra dagger from her holster. She dashed in, slashing wildly at the incoming vines. Shing! Shing! 2 vines were cut cleanly, but a third wrapped around her ankle. Ah! She was yanked off her feet, her body smashing against the ground as she was dragged across the street. Pain ripped through her leg. Her dagger slipped from her grasp. The vine lifted her into the air, tightening around her waist. Her ribs screamed as pressure crushed down on her lungs. I can't breathe. Belle's vision darkened at the edges. Her fingers brushed something cold. The Hestia knife. With a desperate cry, Belle drove the blade into the vine constricting her. The monster shrieked and loosened its grip. Just enough. Belle tore herself free and crashed to the ground, rolling to a stop several meters away. Belle! Watch out! Hestia's shout made Belle turn her head. Her pupils shrank when she saw the monster's jaws already upon her, gaping wide and ready to devour her whole. It's too fast. I can't move out of the way in time. She grit her teeth and shut her eyes. But the expected pain never came. When Belle opened them again, the plant monster was frozen in place, its maw still wide open. I respectfully speak to you, my war god who can break through anything. Led me from the precious heavens. Grant my petty body the divine power of your grand form. A chant echoed through the battlefield. The monster twisted its head, its attention snapping toward the source of the voice. There. Makoto knelt on the ground, hands clasped as she continued her incantation. It was as if the monster had completely forgotten about Belle. With a furious screech, it charged toward Makoto, treating her as its sole target. That thing reacts to magic. Belle forced herself upright and snatched the Hestia knife from the ground. This is our chance. She tensed her legs and sprinted forward. Everyone! Protect Makoto! Oka shouted as he and the other members of the Takamikazuchi familia rushed in, swinging their weapons down with everything they had. Ah! The plant monster screeched and bulldozed straight through them, bodies flying through the air like broken dolls. Judging by its movements, it was almost as if the monster snorted in disdain before turning its head once more, preparing to charge again. However, stay here. Despite the pain racking his battered body, Uka threw himself forward, wrapping his only functioning arm around the creature's massive form and holding it in place. One by one, the remaining adventurers followed suit, clinging to the monster's vines and stalk with grim determination. Rescue them, light of purification. Sword of crushing evil. Sweep forth, blade of suppression, sacred sword of conquest. By my command, arrive here now. Makoto ignored the chaos unfolding before her, her voice steady as she continued chanting. Sensing the danger of the spell, the monster roared in rage and thrashed violently. The adventurers' grips loosened one after another, and they were flung away in every direction. Over a dozen adventurers working together, and they could only hold it back for a few seconds. And yet, those few seconds were enough. Descend from heaven and rule the earth. Shinbu Tozai. A purple magic circle flared to life. Futsunama-tama. Chapter 134, Little Hero. Futsunama-tama. A powerful heavy gravity magic that affects a given area. Despite the owner being only a level 2, this was a magic that is capable of trapping even monster Rexes in place. The moment Makoto's voice rang out, the air shuddered. An invisible pressure pressed down on the battlefield, heavy and overwhelming, as if the very heavens had turned their gaze upon them. From the blazing purple magic circle, a massive spectral blade made of light descended. The plant monster shrieked in terror as the divine sword pierced straight through its massive body, pinning it to the street below. Boom! The impact shattered the ground, cracked spiderwebbing outward as a shockwave blasted through the area. Loose debris was flung skyward, and the surrounding adventurers were forced to shield their faces as dust and splinters filled the air. The monster convulsed violently. Its vines thrashed wildly, tearing up stone and snapping wooden stalls apart as it struggled to get back up. Kill it! But make sure not to get caught up in the spell's effect range. Makoto shouted, her voice strained. I won't be able to hold it for long. She was held in place, positioning her right palm over her left as she tried to maintain her spell. Let's go! Seeing this opportunity, the adventurers immediately raised their weapons and threw them toward the creature. Axes, swords, spears, halberds, and hammers were thrown into the air. Some bounced off the creature, while others pierced through its skin as it shouted in agony. There were some adventurers who had begun chanting their attack magic, words flowing through the air. The moment they finished their chanting, they unleashed their spells, creating colorful explosions that lit up the area. The plant creature tried fighting back by lashing out with its vines. However, the adventurers, having been hit by the same attack before, figured out the vine's attack range and stayed out of reach. Keep attacking until that thing is dead. An adventurer shouted. They continued to bombard it with attacks for a couple of seconds until the creature's cries started dying down. Chunks of its flesh had been blown off, and its green skin was turning black. Because of Makoto's gravity magic, it could not move. Which was why, despite being attacked from all sides, its gaze never left Makoto. It was then that the plant creature did something unexpected. It grabbed a piece of debris using its vines and threw it toward Makoto. Exclamation point. No one expected this situation to occur, and before anyone noticed it, the debris slammed into Makoto with a loud crash. Makoto puked a mouthful of blood, her concentration faltering as her spell was undone. The purple magic circle slowly disintegrated, and as if to celebrate its newfound freedom, the plant creature roared loudly, making sure everyone in the vicinity heard its cry. The surrounding adventurers froze, their faces pale, too terrified to move. Shit! They cursed in their minds as beads of sweat fell from their faces. A sliver of despair crept into their hearts, even though they were aware that the creature was injured and most likely weakened. But the sudden momentum shift caused them to become too shaken to move their bodies. All except for one. The sound of footsteps was heard. As the only adventurer who didn't give in to despair, Belle didn't hesitate. She sprinted forward. Her entire world narrowed to the struggling monster before her. Magic stone, where is it? Her eyes darted over its writhing form. Then she saw it. A faint, pulsating glow deep within the stalk. Partially exposed from all the damage the adventurers had inflicted. There! Belle shouted in her mind. Inside the stalk. She leapt. Using the monster's convulsing vines as footholds, Belle ran straight up its body, each step taken on instinct alone. It was only a matter of time before she closed the distance. The monster, seeing this, let out a threatening growl. A vine whipped toward Belle, moving so fast that her reaction time couldn't keep up. I lost. Belle instinctively realized it was an attack that would instantly knock her out. Just as she realized her defeat, a miracle occurred. A compressed wave of air tore through the space before her. Boom! The vine exploded midair, green juices splattering across Belle's face. Ha! Her confusion lasted less than a heartbeat. She seized the chance and surged forward. The plant creature's eyes widened in disbelief, and Belle met its gaze without flinching. Belle twisted midair, drawing back the Hestia knife with everything she had left. Ha! She plunged the blade down. At that moment, to the plant monster, those red-colored eyes felt like the eyes of death itself. The Hestia knife pierced the glowing core cleanly. For a heartbeat. Silence. Then. Crack. Light exploded outward as the magic stone shattered, the monster's entire body freezing mid-motion before crumbling into ash. Belle landed on the ground and knelt. She stared at the pile of ash where the monster had stood, her chest rising and falling as exhaustion finally crashed down on her. They had won. We did it! Someone among the adventurers shouted as everyone who had participated in the battle erupted in cheers. Belle! You did it! Hestia ran toward her with a happy smile. He. In response, Belle let out a tired laugh, her voice hoarse. At the corner of her eye, Belle saw the Takamikazuchi familia walking toward her. We can't thank you enough for what you've done, Uka and the others said as they bowed deeply, their tone filled with gratitude. The citizens who had been hiding inside their homes and buildings finally came outside and started clapping. Amazing! Little hero! Although the battle had mostly been a group effort, in the eyes of the citizens, and even the adventurers alike, her display of bravery as she dealt the final blow filled them with awe. Can you tell us your name, little hero? Someone in the crowd asked. Hearing this, Belle hesitated for a moment, then shifted her gaze to stare Hestia in the eyes. This is your time in the spotlight, go for it. Hestia said with a proud grin. Hearing her goddess words, Belle nodded and then spoke. My name is Belle. Belle Crannel. It was on this day that the name Belle Crannel began to slowly spread in Orario. Oomph, looks like she's having fun. From a random rooftop some distance away, Althea watched everything unfold. Deducting 40 points because I had to interfere. I'll give you a total score of 60 points. Althea muttered under her breath as she looked down and saw the corpses of plant monsters piled into a small hill. Chapter 135, Lafia's Case. Meanwhile. Kya! A shrill scream echoed down the street as another of the plant-like monsters, identical to the one Judas had fought, rampaged through a different district of the city. Debris littered the ground, buildings groaned under damaged stone, and terrified civilians fled in every direction. Seriously, what are those things? From the rooftop, the Amazon twins and Lafia sprinted across tiles and beams, eyes narrowed as they headed straight toward the disturbance. Lafia, observe the situation and provide support. Tione barked sharply as she leapt over a chimney. Why yes. Lafia replied, gripping her staff until her knuckles turned white. Her heartbeat thudded loudly in her ears, but her eyes remained focused. In the street below, two plant monsters twisted toward a fallen citizen, jaws opening, vines whipping in anticipation. Help me! The man cried, scrambling weakly backward. Not on our watch! Tiona and Tione roared in unison. With explosive footwork, they dropped from the rooftop, fists cocked back. Their punches detonated against the monsters' heads. Powerful blows from two level 5 adventurers that should have turned any normal creature into pulp. However, why is it so hard? Tione hissed as pain shot through her knuckles. Tiona shook her hand out, face contorting. Our fists barely made a dent. To their disbelief, the monsters staggered back only for a heartbeat, then rose again, vines writhing, bodies unbroken. Geez, if only we brought our weapons. Tiona complained through clenched teeth. Roar! Both monsters screeched and surged toward them, their vine-like bodies whipping through the air with enough force to split stone. The twins darted apart, dodging, weaving, letting the vines smash into the ground where they had stood moments before. Tisk! This is getting annoying. Grinding her teeth, Tione slipped under a sweeping vine, planted her foot, and delivered a brutal kick to the monster's head. A booming shockwave cracked the pavement. Yet the creature merely snapped its head back into place, shaking off the blow like a mild inconvenience. The hell? Tione shouted. The monster retaliated instantly, lunging with its gaping jaws. Tione twisted away, flipping back to Tiona's side. They exchanged a quick glance, battle-hardened, efficient, reading each other instantly. After several more engagements, they finally pieced it together. That thing is resistant to bludgeoning damage. Tiona growled, shaking feeling back into her hand. Our fists aren't doing jack. Tione added, her expression tightening as she watched the monster's movements. Sometimes, in battle, it was not sheer strength alone that decided the victor. Power levels mattered, yes, but that is not everything. There were countless other variables that shaped the outcome of a fight: terrain, timing, instincts, experience, and one of the most important of all, compatibility. Even the mightiest warrior could be brought to their knees if they faced an enemy perfectly suited to counter them. And right now, Tione and Tiona knew it. Without their weapons, standing against monsters that shrugged off their blows and retaliated with unpredictable, whip-like attacks. These plant creatures were, without question, the worst possible matchup for the Amazon twins. They felt it in the sting in their knuckles, in the way their strikes sank in but failed to crush. A bad pairing. An unfavorable matchup. Lafia watched everything unfold with wide eyes, her breath caught in her throat. Those monsters, without their weapons, Tione and Tiona won't be able to finish them off. The sight was unbelievable. The Amazon twins, two first-class adventurers, had struck the monsters with blows that should have reduced them to pulp. Yet the creatures stood back up, unfazed, their vines writhing with unnatural vitality. That was when it truly sank in. These weren't ordinary monsters. Still, despite the fear creeping up her spine, Lafia clenched her trembling hands around her staff. Even so, I can't just sit here and do nothing. She had worked tirelessly. Trained until her throat went raw from chanting. Practiced concurrent chanting until her head throbbed. She earned this progress. I can use concurrent chanting now. I shouldn't be a burden to them anymore. Yes. I'm growing. Catching up to them little by little. I won't stay behind in the sidelines forever, this is my chance, to prove that I can stand with them. Heart pounding, Lafia began her chant, voice steady, magic swelling around her. She imagined it clearly, the brilliant spell, the triumphant destruction of the enemy, the proud looks on her seniors' faces, perhaps even a pat on the head or a few words of praise from her idol. A warm glow filled her chest, and that was when everything went wrong. Without warning, the plant monsters disengaged from the twins and snapped their heads toward her. The moment her chanting began, all their attention locked onto a new target. Ha! Confusion flickered across Lafia's face just as Tione's eyes widened in realization. Lafia! Get out of the way! Tione dashed forward, only for a wave of additional plant monsters to suddenly burst from an alleyway, blocking her path. You've got to be kidding me! Tione snarled, skidding back as several vines cracked toward her like living whips. Even Tiona, nimble as she was, couldn't break away fast enough. Lafia barely had time to lift her gaze before she saw it, the yawning maw of a monster lunging straight for her, its petals peeling back like grotesque blades, its scent thick and sickly. Her entire body went cold. Move! Her mind shrieked the command, every instinct urging her to dodge, to roll, to run, but her legs refused. Her imagination betrayed her. She saw it, saw herself crushed in those jaws, saw the blood, saw her own lifeless body on the street. As a rearguard mage, she had always fought behind the protection of others. Facing death this closely was something she had never been prepared for. And so she froze. Just a heartbeat of hesitation, but that was all it took. Her focus shattered, her chant slipped, and Ignis fatuus. A violent burst of unstable magic exploded around her. The street flashed white. Lafia was thrown off her feet. Lafia! Tione and Tiona's worried shouts went unheard, drowned beneath the ringing in her ears as Lafia was thrown backward, the world spinning around her. Chapter 136, Reaffirm One's Resolve. A golden phantom swept across the rooftops. Ace Wallenstein moved like a streak of light, her blonde hair trailing behind her as wind pressure rippled around her form. Her eyes darted left and right, sharp and unblinking, her sword already drawn. Every sense honed to its limit. Below, a plant monster lurked near an alley, its massive body scraping against stone as it slithered forward. Ace didn't hesitate. She kicked off the rooftop and shot downward. Wah! A child ran across the street in blind panic, tears streaming down their face. Their foot caught on a broken stone and they tumbled forward, scraping their hands against the ground. Mommy! The monster reared back, its maw opening wide. Ace's expression hardened. Her legs tensed further, muscles coiling like drawn bowstrings, and she accelerated once more, pushing her body beyond its previous limit. Swish! 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 Silver arcs flashed through the air, clean and precise. The sword sang as it moved, and in the blink of an eye the plant monster was carved apart, its body collapsing into severed vines and petals that hit the street with dull thuds. Ace landed lightly between the child and the remains, sword lowered. For a brief moment, she watched. The child's mother came rushing in, scooping them up and holding them tightly as sobs of relief poured out. I was so scared. I know. Tears streamed freely as she hugged her child with all her strength. Thank you, the woman said, voice trembling as she looked at Ace. Ace met her gaze for a second, long enough to register the relief, the gratitude, then simply nodded, her face as calm and unreadable as ever. The next moment, she was already gone. A burst of wind marked her departure as she dashed off once more, golden hair flickering between rooftops as she searched for the next threat. Then, boom! Her ears twitched. A distant explosion rolled through the city, sharp and unmistakable. Ace skidded to a halt atop a rooftop, eyes narrowing as she turned toward the source. Without a word, she shifted her footing and changed direction. Whatever had caused that explosion, it wasn't something she could ignore. Pain slammed into her back as Lafia hit the ground, air ripped from her lungs in a silent gasp. The sky spun above her, blue, stone, smoke, before blurring into a mess of afterimages. Her ears rang violently, a high-pitched whine drowning out everything else, even her own ragged breathing. I messed up. The thought surfaced sluggishly through the haze. Her staff clattered across the street, skidding out of reach. Damn it! Tione forced her way through the vines, she tore them aside with brute strength alone. She didn't bother to look back, her eyes were locked on Lafia's crumpled form. Tiona! Cover me! Already on it. Tiona darted in from the side, snatching up a chunk of broken stone and hurling it with all her strength. The projectile slammed into the monster's head, knocking it off course just enough to buy them a second. A single second was all Tione needed. She crashed into the plant monster like a battering ram, driving it back with a feral roar. Vines wrapped around her arms, thorns biting into her skin, but she ignored this and tore them apart. Stay away from her! The monster shrieked as it was forced back, but more of them were already closing in, drawn by the lingering traces of Lafia's unstable magic. On the ground, Lafia tried to move. Her fingers twitched. Her vision swam. Stand up! Her body didn't respond. Tears stung her eyes. Not from pain, but from frustration. From fear. From the crushing realization that she had become exactly what she had sworn not to be. A burden. I can still. Her voice came out hoarse, barely audible even to herself. She clenched her teeth, forcing herself to breathe through the ringing in her ears. She then shifted her gaze to a plant monster that was heading her way, its massive body dragging along the ground, vines scraping against stone as its hollow gaze locked onto her. Cold, instinctual, as if she were nothing more than prey. And no. Her breath came out shaky as she turned her body, palms scraping against the street as she tried to crawl away. Every movement sent pain shooting through her limbs, her strength draining faster than her fear. It's the same. That thought struck harder than the pain. It was then doubt began creeping in, slow and suffocating, wrapping itself around her chest. Nothing has changed. Her fingers trembled. I am still a burden. No matter how much she trained. No matter how hard she tried. I just wanted to become strong enough to fight by her side. In her mind, an image surfaced unbidden, the slender back of the golden princess, shining as she cut through monsters without hesitation, always moving forward, never looking back. The one who had once saved her life. And in that moment, Lafia hated herself. For being weak. For being scared. For still needing to be protected. I hate this. She grit her teeth, a sharp sting filling her mouth as blood began to drip from the corner of her lips, splattering onto the stone beneath her. Forcing herself to look up, Lafia's vision swam, but what she saw made her heart sink even further. Tioni and Tiona. Both of them were bound tightly by thick, writhing vines, muscles straining as they tried to tear free and force their way toward her. Damn it! Lafia! Their voices reached her, strained and desperate. But it was already too late. The monster had closed the distance. Its massive jaws opened wide, rows of sharp, uneven teeth glinting as they descended toward her, its foul breath washing over her face. There was nowhere left to run. Lafia slowly closed her eyes. As if, accepting her fate. But then. The expected pain never came. Swoosh. The sharp sound of air being cleaved apart made her eyes snap open. The monster in front of her split cleanly in two. Its severed body crashed to the ground in heavy, wet thuds, lifeless vines twitching as dust and debris billowed into the air. Lafia's eyes widened. Ace? Her head snapped up instinctively, her heart leaping as she searched for that familiar golden figure. The one who always arrived at the last moment. However, what greeted her instead were a pair of calm, piercing purple eyes. Black hair. A figure standing between her and death. You look like a mess. The words were blunt. Flat. There was no comfort in them, no gentle reassurance. Because the speaker knew she didn't need pity right now. Lafia's eyes trembled, light flickering within them. Stand up, he said. Try again. His gaze didn't waver, didn't soften. Or is your resolve so weak that you already gave up with just this? Chapter 137, An Elven Adventure. The words struck harder than any blow. Lafia's breath caught in her throat. Her fingers dug weakly into the dirt beneath her, nails scraping against stone as her body trembled, not from pain, but from something far worse. Shame. Her lips parted, yet no sound came out. The ringing in her ears drowned out everything else, save for the steady cadence of his voice and the sight of his unmoving back. He didn't look down on her, nor did he offer a hand. Her voice cracked the moment it escaped. She swallowed hard, forcing air back into her lungs. I tried. I trained, she whispered. I pushed myself. I thought if I worked harder, if I just caught up a little. Her teeth clenched. But when it mattered, I froze. The figure in front of her turned his head slightly, just enough for one eye to glance back at her. Those purple irises reflected her kneeling form without judgment, only cold clarity. You can stay there, he continued calmly, already shifting his stance. Wait for someone else to save you. A pause. Or you can get up, he said, voice lowering, sharper now. And prove to yourself that you're not a burden. Lafia's breath hitched. A memory surfaced, golden hair disappearing into the front lines, a back she could never quite reach. A hand that had once pulled her from despair. Her fingers curled. I'm not, she whispered. With a shaky gasp, Lafia planted her staff against the ground and forced her body upward, legs screaming in protest as she stood. The purple-eyed boy finally turned fully toward her. For the first time, a faint hint of approval flickered across his face. Want my word of advice? Judah's sudden question cut through the chaos of battle. Lafia, who had been tightly gripping her staff, flinched slightly before nodding. Yes, please. Judas turned his back to her once again, his attention returning to the battlefield ahead. Tioni and Tiona were locked in combat with the plant monsters. They weren't having an easy time finishing them off, their movements forceful and aggressive as the monsters stubbornly resisted. Even so, Judas showed no sign of concern. Although they were struggling to deal with these monsters, their lives were far from being in danger. From what I can see, you're letting your nerves take over. Judas continued, his voice steady. He lifted a finger and casually pointed toward one of the monsters. A magic circle bloomed at the tip of his fingertip, glowing faintly purple. The surrounding plant monsters reacted instantly. Drawn by the sudden surge of magic, their twisted heads snapped toward him, thorny maws opening wide. But before a single shriek could escape them, a concentrated beam of energy shot forth. Fwoom! One monster didn't even have time to register pain. Its upper body was erased entirely, reduced to drifting ash before it could hit the ground. Judas! Tiona called out, her eyes sparkling as she flashed him a bright grin. You've only just learned concurrent chanting, Judas said calmly, as if he hadn't just erased a monster in an instant. It's perfectly normal to stumble. No one masters it right away. Lafia listened intently, every word sinking deep into her heart. At some point, without her even realizing it, the idea of being his rival quietly faded away. In its place grew something warmer, something heavier. Admiration. My advice? Judas said, lifting his hand once more. This time, the air itself responded. The temperature around them dropped sharply, frost creeping along the ground. Don't fixate on the result, he continued. Immerse yourself in the process. A second spell activated. In an instant, every remaining plant monster, save for one, was entombed in solid ice. Nice one. Tioni laughed, cracking her knuckles as veins bulged along her arms. Hap! One punch from each sister was all it took. The frozen monsters shattered into fragments, ice and body parts exploding outward like glass. Silence followed. Only one monster remained. Everyone turned their attention toward it as the creature slowly twisted its body, locking onto them before letting out a shrill screech. Judas turned toward Lafia. How about it? Think you can manage? A bead of sweat rolled down her cheek. That was when she realized it. He had left one alive, on purpose. Not by chance. Not by oversight. By design. The precision, the control, it sent a shiver down her spine. Lafia swallowed hard. Anxiety churned in her stomach, memories of her recent brush with death resurfacing against her will. But when Lafia shifted her gaze and met Judas' purple eyes, for some reason, that alone was enough to calm her racing heart. She exhaled slowly, tightening her grip on her staff. Yes. I can. Her voice wavered slightly, but it didn't break. She raised her staff and fixed her eyes on the plant monster ahead, its spines writhing restlessly against the ground. Then prove it. Judas crossed his arms, stepping back as if the outcome no longer concerned him. Lafia took a deep breath and began gathering mind into her staff. Screech! The monster sensed it. The surge of magic agitated the creature instantly. It let out a shrill roar and charged without hesitation, roots tearing free from the ground as it barreled toward her like a living avalanche of thorns. Oi, Tioni muttered, walking up beside Judas with her sister. Is it really fine leaving that thing to Lafia alone? Letting adventurers face danger on their own to grow stronger was common practice among familiars. However, she knew firsthand how dangerous those monsters were. Level 4. Far beyond what a level 3 mage should be facing. Judas glanced at them, then shrugged casually. Who knows? Tioni nearly lost her balance. But, what I do know, is that right now. Judas added, watching Lafia stand her ground. A faint smile tugged at his lips. Lafia is having an adventure. Both Tioni and Tiona fell silent, their attention drawn forward as the elven mage stepped ahead. For reasons they couldn't quite explain, her small, resolute figure overlapped with another memory. A lone girl standing her ground against impossible odds. Just like Belle Cranel had once faced 3 minotaurs head-on, fear trembling in her body yet resolve burning brighter than terror. In that moment, Lafia looked the same. Not because of her strength, but because she had chosen to move forward anyway. Chapter 138, Thousand Elf vs. Violas. The distance between Lafia and the monster closed in a heartbeat. Vines lashed outward like whips, tearing grooves into the ground as the creature surged forward. Compared to before, this particular plant monster was slower, its movements heavier, more sluggish, because of the damage it had already sustained from fighting the Amazon twins earlier. Several of its petals had been violently torn away, and many of its vines hung limp or half-ripped, leaking thick green sap that splattered across the stone floor. Its overall combat strength had been reduced by nearly an entire level. This monster was clearly on its last legs. Lafia was aware of that. But weakened did not mean harmless. Her heart thundered in her chest. Too fast. Too close. Instinct screamed at her to retreat, to put distance between herself and the charging beast. But Lafia refused to run away. She stayed firm and planted her feet. Immerse yourself in the process. Judas' words surfaced in her mind, cutting through the rising panic. She let go of every unnecessary thought, the fear, the doubt, the countless what-ifs that usually flooded her thoughts. The flow of mind gathered around her staff, steady and obedient. The trembling in her hands eased as her breathing fell into rhythm. Inhale. Exhale. Each breath aligned with the pulse of the spell forming within her. The world around her dimmed, fading into darkness, until only two things remained in her vision. Herself. And the enemy before her. I wish upon the name of wish. Ancestors of the forest, proud brethren. Answer my call and come to the plains. A vine whip suddenly lashed out toward her right, cutting through the air with a sharp crack. Lafia's ears twitched. She shifted her body just in time, the vine grazing past her robes by a hair's breadth. She didn't stop chanting. She didn't lose rhythm. Connecting bonds, the pledge of paradise. Turn the circle and dance around. Come, ring of fairies. A magic circle flared beneath her feet, emerald light blooming outward and illuminating the area. Please, give me strength. Elf ring. Tioni, who had been watching with a serious expression, widened her eyes. Ha! Lafia can do concurrent chanting now? Since when? She clearly remembered their most recent expedition. Lafia standing still, completely vulnerable whenever she cast a spell, always needing someone to protect her. Hee, looks like you need to catch up on the latest news, sis. Tiona giggled, grinning proudly as she watched her friend in action. So you knew this whole time? Tioni said, raising a brow. So I was worried for nothing. While the Amazon sisters exchanged words, Judas' attention was fixed elsewhere. Elf ring. His eyes narrowed slightly as he analyzed every aspect of Lafia's magic. He had heard of this spell before. Simply put, it was a cheat-like magic, one that allowed Lafia to replicate any spell as long as it originated from an elf. It was the reason she had earned the alias Thousand Elf. The reason she had become Reverial Joe's elf's disciple, and her successor. And also the reason she was one of the exceedingly rare individuals capable of bypassing the 3 magic slot rule. Lafia Voridus was undoubtedly a genius. In fact, in terms of potential alone, she surpassed even Reveria herself. That was Judas' most honest evaluation. And yet, why didn't someone like her show up in the anime? The thought crossed his mind naturally. Perhaps she was one of those characters destined to appear later in the story. After all, after season 3. That was where Judas' knowledge, passed on to him by Alden, ended. Everything beyond that, he would have to witness with his own eyes. As adventurers who had survived repeated expeditions into the deep floors, making such observations was not optional, it was instinct. When facing the unknown, hesitation born from ignorance was often fatal. Knowing what an enemy could do, how it moved, what it reacted to, what it prioritized, could mean the difference between walking back to the surface or never returning at all. Even Lafia had already noticed it. This plant-like monster reacted abnormally strongly to magic power. Every time she gathered mind, its movements sharpened. Its attention locked onto her completely, abandoning every other target as if they no longer existed. That was why the monster continued to chase her relentlessly while ignoring the others. And Lafia understood that better than anyone. Yet despite the monster's relentless pursuit, she didn't stop. She didn't break her stride. She continued chanting. Beads of sweat rolled down her face, dripping from her chin as her breath grew ragged, yet the words continued to spill from her lips without pause. Harbinger of the end, the white snow. Blow with the wind before the twilight. The monster slammed its massive body into a wall, rebounded, and lashed its vines wildly, thorns scraping against stone as it snapped its jaws, trying to tear into its prey. Still, Lafia did not halt. This chant. It's Riveria's magic. The realization struck the Amazon twins at the same time. They recognized it instantly. Closing light, the freezing land. Blizzard, the 3 severe winters, my name is Elf. The magic circle beneath Lafia's feet expanded, intricate runes layering over one another as emerald light deepened into an icy, luminous blue. This was no ordinary spell. It was magic bestowed by the princess of the elves herself, the woman publicly recognized as the most formidable mage in the world. An absolute zero freezing magic. Win Fimbulvetter. Lafia raised her staff the moment the chant concluded. And what followed was not sound, but blinding, absolute light. The light swallowed everything. For a brief instant, sound, color, even motion were erased beneath the overwhelming brilliance pouring from Lafia's staff. Crack! The temperature plummeted. A shockwave of frost exploded outward, coating the area around them in an instant. Ice raced across stone like living veins, sealing cracks and freezing the air itself. At the center of it all stood the plant monster. Its charging body froze mid-motion. Vines stiffened, petals crystallized, and the green sap spilling from its wounds turned solid in a heartbeat. A layer of ice enveloped it completely. Silence followed. An oppressive, reverent silence. Lafia stood there, staff still raised, her entire body trembling as the residual magic power bled out of her. The magic circle beneath her feet flickered weakly before fading away. Her knees buckled. Before she could fall, she forced herself to stay upright, planting the butt of her staff into the frozen ground and gasping for air. I did it. She whispered, disbelief lacing her voice. She had finished the chant. She had maintained it under pressure. And she had executed it without anyone's help or protection. Lafia finally lowered her staff. Her hands were shaking. Her lungs burned. Yet for the first time, there was no shame weighing down her chest. Only exhaustion. And a quiet, undeniable pride. Judas stepped forward at last. Well done, he said simply. 2 words. But to Lafia, they meant everything. Chapter 139, Viola's Exterminated. In an unknown underground location beneath the city of Orario. The air was damp, heavy with the scent of metal, blood, and something far more unpleasant. A masked individual clad in a black cloak walked through the passage with measured, silent steps. Well. A feminine voice echoed lazily through the corridor. The masked figure paused and turned their head. From the shadows emerged a pink-haired woman, her boots clicking against the stone as she approached with a crooked smirk plastered across her face. If it isn't Inio's favorite little tool. Ein. The woman was Valletta Greed. Among the remnants of Evolus, she was known as the one who kept things running smoothly, the strategist who handled things behind the scenes. Ein gave no response. The masked individual simply turned their head forward again and resumed walking, deliberately ignoring her presence. A vein throbbed visibly on Valletta's forehead. So that's how you're going to act, huh? In the next instant, her figure blurred. The sound of displaced air cracked sharply as Valletta appeared directly behind Ein and clamped a hand down on their shoulder with crushing force.
The grip was strong enough to pulverize bone. Despite this, Ayn didn't react.
After all, despite her flirtatious manner and mocking tone, Valletta was a level 5 first-class adventurer, one of the strongest fighters Evelus still had.
Oi! Valletta's voice dropped, all amusement gone. I know production's gone up thanks to the Demon King's wisdom. But I can't let things like this slide.
Her crimson eyes narrowed. I noticed over 100 Violas went missing from the factory. She leaned closer, her breath brushing against the side of Ayn's mask.
Don't tell me this was you and Inaios doing? The name lingered in the air. Inaio.
A god who had never once shown his face.
Valletta's expression darkened slightly as her thoughts drifted. Inaio.
She had questioned Thanatos about him once.
And only once.
Never heard of him, Thanatos had said. No such god existed in heaven. Even after years of cooperation, Inaio remained a shadow wrapped in deeper shadows, his identity obscured, his true intentions unreadable.
Not even Valletta knew what he truly wanted.
But she didn't care. As long as the plans progressed smoothly. As long as Orario burned.
As long as everything moved according to her design.
Working with a god who refused to reveal himself was a small price to pay.
But this time, they went a bit too far. Valletta thought, clutching Ayn's shoulder even tighter.
Yet I didn't offer so much as a wince or a grunt of pain, answering instead as if it were a simple matter of fact.
Whatever Inaios' will is. I follow it. It's that simple. Ayn said briefly. Valletta's eyes narrowed.
Though they operated under the same banner, this was precisely why alliances among those who lived in the shadows were fragile at best. Each of them served their own purpose, followed their own beliefs, and tolerated one another only so long as their goals aligned. Trust was never part of the equation, and unity was nothing more than a temporary convenience. But in truth, the real reason the plant monsters were sent to attack the city was because of the corrupted spirit nestled on the 60th floor. For some reason, it was obsessed with finding someone named Arya. To appease it, Inaio had simply sent out a small army of Violas into Orario, pretending to search for this so-called Arya. It was all for the sake of maintaining the contract they had established with the corrupted spirit. Of course, for Inaio, the fact that he had unleashed such chaos upon the city of heroes was merely a bonus. A theater he conducted, with Orario as the stage.
Arya, isn't that the wind spirit from the fairy tale dungeon Oratoria?
The spirit companion of the hero Albert Waldenstein, the only hero who had ever severely wounded the ancient black dragon by taking one of its eyes. Even now, Ayn could hear the voice of the corrupted spirit in her mind, whispering words that repeated endlessly, like a broken machine. Valletta, meanwhile, merely stared at Ayn, looking directly at where her eyes should have been, as if trying to see through the mask itself. Because of the mess you made, the Loki Familia will be forced to get involved now. Valletta said, her voice edged with irritation. And that little rat, Finn, will start scurrying around our trails like a hunting dog, poking his nose where it doesn't belong. Valletta said as the two stared at one another. When she mentioned Finn, I noticed her tone shift, just slightly.
Anger, or malice, perhaps? But that was where Ayn's thoughts ended.
With my god's grand plans, the Loki Familia was always going to get involved. We simply sped up the process, she replied calmly. The plan will not be affected.
That is all.
That was all the Masten said before her figure suddenly warped and shrank.
The moment Valletta blinked, Ayn had already vanished from her sight.
Tisk.
Valletta clicked her tongue in irritation before letting out a grin. Fine, do it your way.
Just don't expect us to save your asses if you get caught between a rock and a hard place. She added before turning around, her figure disappearing into the shadows. Back on the streets of Orario, the aftermath of the battle still lingered heavily in the air. Broken stone littered the road, and deep gouges scarred the pavement where thick mines had torn through the street. Faint motes of light drifted upward as the last remnants of magic dissipated, marking where plant monsters had once stood.
I think that's all of them.
Judas muttered the words as he clapped the dust from his hands, his calm gaze following the final plant monster as it collapsed in on itself before crumbling into ash.
Woohoo! With a sword, this is way easier.
Tiona cheered, gripping a borrowed blade as she brought it down in a wide arc, cleaving the struggling plant creature clean in half. The two halves hit the ground with a heavy thud before dissolving into particles of light.
Judas didn't bother sparing it another glance.
Lafia, stay still.
I'm going to heal you.
He turned his attention to the amber-haired elf, who stiffened for a moment before quickly nodding.
Yes.
She held her breath as Judas extended his hand, the soft glow of healing magic blooming from his palm. Warm light washed over her body, and in an instant, the scratches, bruises, and lingering pain she had endured vanished without a trace.
Thank you very much, Judas.
Lafia's voice trembled slightly as she looked up at him, her ocean blue eyes shimmering with admiration. If Ace Wallenstein occupied the most revered place in her heart, then Judas had firmly rooted himself in second.
Woo! Good job, you guys, you killed it out there.
Literally. Loki's familiar voice cut through the moment as the goddess suddenly appeared from seemingly nowhere, her hands tucked casually into her pockets and a grin plastered across her face.
Ha! Ganesha and his kids are gonna have their hands full trying to investigate this mess.
She glanced around at the ruined street, the scattered remains of monsters, and the exhausted adventurers still catching their breath.
Oh, right.
Tioni, Loki added, snapping her fingers.
Go check underground, will ya? My intuition's telling me there's something fishy down there.
Got it. Tiona replied enthusiastically, already bouncing on her heels.
Ha, figures. Tioni muttered, though she was already moving.
Just then, Rose arrived with several guild staff members, all of them visibly relieved now that the danger had passed. Thank you for your hard work. Rose offered a polite bow, a faint blush coloring her cheeks as her eyes settled on Judas.
No problem.
Judas inclined his head slightly in response. Nearby, Tiona returned the borrowed sword to its owner with a bright grin, thanking them before jogging off with her sister.
Right. If you don't mind, Judas, could you please make use of your healing magic once again?
There are still many injured taking shelter nearby.
Rose said hesitantly, clasping her hands together. Seeing the earnestness in her expression, Judas nodded without hesitation.
Of course. He turned and followed her toward the shelter, the soft murmur of injured civilians growing louder with each step.
Hey, why are you agreeing so easily?
Loki suddenly slung an arm around his neck, leaning her weight against him as she rubbed two fingers together with an exaggeratedly greedy expression.
I'm your goddess, you know?
I say we charge them for your services. After all, your healing magic can rival even Ermid's.
Let's go.
Judas replied flatly, not even sparing her a glance as he continued walking beside Rose, completely ignoring Loki's protests.
Oi! Don't ignore me. Chapter 140, Loki vs. Hestia. It wasn't that Judas was completely indifferent toward money. He understood its value well enough, what it could buy, what it could protect, and how easily a lack of it could become a burden. But after receiving billions of Valis directly from Freya, the concept of money had quietly lost its urgency. Because Judas had already become one of the wealthiest individuals in the entire world. Compared to that, charging others for his healing services, as Loki had so casually suggested, never even crossed his mind. It felt unnecessary, almost petty. Am I already the richest person in the world?
The thought surfaced unbidden, lingering for a brief moment before fading. Of course, the title of the richest individual actually belonged to Althea, someone who possessed a staggering 40 billion Valis tucked away in her account.
But Judas didn't know that.
And even if he did, he likely wouldn't have cared much either.
Hey! Don't leave your beautiful goddess alone.
Loki complained as she and Lafia followed closely behind Judas and Rose. After several minutes of walking, while the city slowly recovered from the plant monster incident, they passed through a particular part of town. It was then that Judas caught fragments of conversation from the surrounding city folk. It seems kind of noisy here. Loki commented, raising a brow as her ears twitched. The thing is, a young girl took care of a monster.
I saw it with my own eyes, it was amazing.
A middle-aged woman said excitedly as she gossiped with another housewife. It was the kind of chatter that cropped up among civilians who rarely ever saw adventurers in action.
An adventurer girl, she had red eyes and white hair, like a bunny rabbit. Her name is Belle Crannel. Hearing that name, Judas couldn't help but smile faintly. Looks like she's starting to gain some attention.
Her achievement likely wouldn't spread too far, this incident would overshadow most individual feats, but it was still a start.
Judas noticed a group of children playing nearby. It's me. Belle Crannel. The little hero.
One of them shouted proudly, swinging a wooden stick through the air.
Little hero? She's getting nicknames already? Judas mused. Belle Crannel, huh? Silence's niece.
Loki thought aloud, rubbing her chin thoughtfully. Eventually, they arrived at a shelter crowded with injured people. Judas's gaze shifted as he spotted Ermid in the distance, along with several members of the Dien sect familia, all busy tending to the wounded.
Here, Ermid. I brought help. Rose called out to the silver-haired healer.
When Ermid lifted her head and saw Judas, she nodded immediately. That's more than enough help. No, I think he's the best help I could ask for right now, she said with a tired sigh, followed by a look of clear relief.
I'll be heading off now. Thank you for all your help. Rose bowed politely, her gaze lingering on Judas for a moment before she turned and left. My mind's a bit exhausted from using healing magic too much. If you can take over for a while, I'd appreciate it. Ermid said, meeting Judas's purple eyes. No problem. Judas nodded and extended his hand, activating his healing magic. Seeing this, Ermid couldn't help but let out a long exhale.
I know he's not a healer, but seeing this makes me want to compete with him. She was known as Aurario's greatest healer, yet honestly, she felt her title might be in danger.
Once Judas finished, Ermid made sure to express her gratitude. Judas? Is that you?
A familiar voice rang out. When Judas turned, he saw Belle running toward him, waving enthusiastically with a bright smile.
Belle? Looks like you got caught up in this incident too,
he said, noticing the bandages wrapped around her forehead and arm.
You did pretty well for yourself, huh? Little hero, he added with a grin. Hee, you know about that? That's embarrassing.
Belle laughed awkwardly, scratching the back of her head as her cheeks reddened. Lafia, watching from the side, stared at Belle with an inquisitive gaze, her eyes narrowing almost imperceptibly.
Who is this girl?
She studied the white-haired adventurer more closely, the way she spoke so freely, the ease in her tone, and the familiarity in her posture. Talking so casually with Judas. The thought left an unpleasant knot in her chest, one she couldn't quite explain.
Judas. Loki. Lafia.
Another feminine voice reached them. Just behind Belle stood Ace, walking toward them with a small nod.
Miss Ace.
You were here the whole time,
Lafia exclaimed as she hurried over. Listen, Miss Ace.
You're never going to guess what I just did. Lafia excitedly recounted her battle with the plant creature, emphasizing her use of concurrent chanting. When she finished, Ace smiled.
You did great, Lafia. You've gotten stronger. The praise hit Lafia like divine judgment.
For the amber-haired elf, it felt as if she had ascended to heaven. Being acknowledged by her idol sent her straight into her own little world.
What about you, Belle? What's your story?
You beat one of those plant creatures, right?
Judas asked, genuinely curious.
He had heard bits and pieces from the crowd, but he wanted to hear it from her directly.
Ah, well. I didn't actually defeat it by myself. I had a lot of help, I only landed the final blow.
Belle replied modestly, twirling a strand of her hair.
Even so, Judas said with a nod. Those creatures were at least level 4.
Tioni and Tiona struggled without their weapons.
Even with help, killing one is impressive.
That's right, Ace added. You should be more proud of yourself.
You're amazing, Belle.
Belle's face lit up at their words.
At that moment, Lafia snapped out of her daze.
Seeing Belle smile, and hearing her praised by both Judas and Ace, sparked an unexpected twinge of jealousy in her chest.
For some reason, I don't like it. That smile, in particular, annoyed her. Like an irritating feeling that wouldn't go away.
Like a younger sibling who was clearly the favorite. While the group was mid-conversation, Loki suddenly bumped into a familiar twin-tailed goddess.
Well, if it isn't Miss Poverty Goddess herself.
A vein popped on Hestia's forehead.
Who are you calling poor, you flat-chested red-haired monkey? Hestia snapped, jabbing a finger into Loki's chest. Who are you calling flat, huh? You lowly with oversized boobs.
Loki shot back, her face twisting in anger.
Look at this cutting board talking.
Your chest is perfect for slicing vegetables, why don't you try it?
Oh wait. You probably already have.
Hestia retorted, her twin tails shaking. The air between them crackled as the two goddesses leaned closer, foreheads nearly touching. You, piece of %%.
Loki growled through clenched teeth. Oh? Hit a nerve? Careful, any louder and your chest might disappear entirely. Oh wait, it's already too late. Hestia added, gasping theatrically with her hands on her cheeks. Their argument quickly drew attention, whispers spreading among the onlookers.
But since the ones arguing were goddesses, no one dared interfere. Judas, standing a short distance away, let out a quiet sigh and shook his head. That wraps up this part of What If a Venerated Soul Reincarnated in Danmachi World.
Thanks so much for listening.
As always, new parts drop every 4 days, so be sure to stay tuned. Also check out my Patreon channel for early releases of all the series, where you can find all the series released one day ahead of YouTube. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and please consider supporting the original author as well.
See you in the next one.